Hi, this is Rev Ed with today's Back Porch Devotional from Genesis chapter 22, verses 1 through 8. After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, "Abraham." And he said, "Here am I." He said, "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you." So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him and his son, Isaac. And he cut the wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place where God had told him. On the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his young men, "Stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you." And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son, and he took in his hand the fire and the knife. So they both went of them together. And Isaac said to his father Abraham, "My father." And he said, "Here am I, my son." He said, "Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham said, "God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son." So they went, both of them together. This is just a terrifying passage, isn't it? Abraham and Sarah have waited 25 years to have a son, and now the boy has reached a certain age, and God says, "Abraham, you need to take your son, your only son whom you love, and you need to sacrifice him to me." He emphasizes that Isaac is his only son, although we know that Abraham has another son, Ishmael. But Isaac is the son through whom God has promised to fulfill all of his covenant relationship with Abraham. He has said Isaac is the one through whom the promise will flow. And you have to wonder, Abraham was raised in a family that worshiped idols. He came from a city where the moon goddess was worshipped. And in those days, the moon goddess and a lot of the other gods and goddesses required human sacrifice. And you wonder if Abraham is beginning to think to himself, well, maybe this God is just like all the other gods I've known who are requiring human sacrifices. But he doesn't object. He doesn't argue. He gets up the next morning and takes Isaac and everything that he needs for this sacrifice. The obedience here is just staggering. And I do think it tells us something about where Abraham has gotten to in his understanding of who this God is. But that line at the beginning, God tested Abraham. I think we need to meditate on that a little bit, because most of us don't realize that testing is something that does indeed come from God. Now, we need to be careful with our language. God does not tempt us, but he does allow tests and trials and tribulations to come into our hearts, into our lives. Proverbs chapter 17, verse 3 says, "The crucible is for silver, and the furnace is for gold, and the Lord tests hearts." See, the thing about testing is that God isn't trying to see whether or not we will be faithful. He's trying to illustrate to us his faithfulness and love for us in the midst of our tests. Trials and tribulations are going to come on everyone. The question is, how are we going to face them? How are we going to respond to them? Will we trust that God has our good and our ultimate well-being in heart? In the book of James, the 1st chapter, he writes this: "Count it all joy, my brothers and sisters, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." And then a little bit farther down, he goes on to say, "Blessed is the one who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him." Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it is conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. So God does not tempt us, he tests us. And in the Greek, the word for temptation is also the word for testing. And so we have to understand that God does indeed allow these tests to come into our lives, that he may demonstrate his faithfulness to us. He will provide everything we need for our tests, and he will be with us through them, and he will be with us on the other side. You'll remember the night before he was crucified, Jesus told Peter, when Peter was promising to be faithful to him, Jesus said, Peter, Satan has asked to have you, that he might sift you like wheat. But when you have been strengthened, restore and strengthen your brothers. He knew that Peter would fall away. He knew what was getting ready to happen to him. But he knew that Peter was going to be okay on the other side. And that experience of testing under trial is what forged Peter's faith for his later witness and ministry and personal courage as he led the church after Jesus had ascended to heaven. The testing of your faith is that for the sake of shaping you into the image of Jesus Christ. And what we have to regard is that everything that comes into our lives, even the good things, can serve as tests. Sometimes when we are so richly blessed, we tend to forget God, don't we? We only cry out to him when we're in trouble. But whether we're having a good day or a bad day, all of it in its own way is a test that is designed to strengthen our faith and shape us into the image of Christ. Abraham did not fail this test after previous failures. God allows these tests to come into our lives as an exercise of our spirit, the strengthening of our faith. So know that when you are tested, God will provide all that you need to bear up under it, that he is with you through it, and that you will resemble Jesus on the other side. It is a powerful promise and something that holds us fast in the midst of whatever trials we are enduring. God's blessings be upon you this day.